afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us. It is my pleasure to introduce a panel of licensed and experienced ALS professionals for this session. This session is all about how DME, durable medical equipment, and assistive technology can help you. Our first panelist is Ben Lehman. Ben has been with the Greater New York chapter since 2011, introducing people living with ALS and their families to assistive and durable medical equipment. With over 35 years of experience working with accessibility and technology for people with disabilities, Ben earned his master's degree in social work from Columbia University and his assistive technology professional certificate from the Rehabilitation and Engineering Assistive Technology Society of North America, also known as RESNA. Ben is the chapter's assistive technology specialist and manages durable medical and communication equipment loan programs. He also makes home visits to assess for in-home accessibility. Ben sets up and trains on various assistive technology. Our next panelist is Jessica Bottone. Jessica is a senior speech language pathologist at New York Presbyterian Columbia Irving Medical Center in Manhattan. She specializes in dysphagia, communication diagnostics, and rehabilitation in pediatric and adult populations. Jess is a part of the multidisciplinary ALS team at Columbia's Certified Treatment Center of Excellence. Her experience includes, but is not limited to, trach, ventilator-dependent, pulmonary, cardiac, and neurological diseases. And last but certainly not least, Lauren Varriale. Lauren is a licensed occupational therapist receiving her master's degree in occupational therapy from New York Institute of Technology in 2007. She previously taught as an adjunct professor at the Occupational Therapy Department for Assistive Technology and Home Modifications at New York Institute of Technology. I will now turn the mic over to Lauren, who will begin our session. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. I am going to share my screen. Okay. Give me a thumbs up if you guys can, on the panel, can see it. Okay, great.
It's actually in presenter mode. Can you go to the top where it says display settings? Go to where it says display settings right next to where your mouse is. And there's, click that one, swap presenter.
Okay. Better?
Hasn't changed yet on my screen.
Oh no.
There it goes, there it goes. Now you're good.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Sorry, technical difficulties. Okay, so just to begin, we joked when we said we had 25 minutes each for this session. So and a full disclosure, we are going to do as much as we can into our time available, and just understand that there is certainly 3 days worth of stuff that we could potentially put on to this conference. So we will certainly answer any questions at the end of this. The main things that I'm going to touch on today is when mobility becomes a little more difficult, what are some options that are available? One of the biggest things that kind of come across our desk as therapists is more pronounced difficulty walking. So there are a bunch of variety of different walkers. The first one is in the top right. It is a rolling walker. It has 2 wheels in the front. It gives you a little bit of stability, a little resistance on certain thresholds and flooring, which is sometimes nice. And then there is a rollator, which has the 4 wheels, which is the red and black one shown here, that has 4 wheels, and it has a little seat built in as well, which some people really like for, those longer distance travels where they need to take a break and sit down. The wheels, there's pros and cons to all of this. The pros would be that it's easier to push. It provides you that seat. But the cons is that it can be very slippery. It becomes very maneuverable, almost to a fault. So there is that option. Sometimes when people are having more difficulty walking those longer distances, for instance, when they're coming into clinic and they need something from the car into the office, the transport chair is a very commonly requested piece of device that can get you basically from point A to point B. This is not by any means a prolonged use of equipment. There is it's very lightweight, so it's very easily collapsible and placed into a trunk of a car. But again, it is bare minimum in terms of support, so it is not recommended for long-term, all day long use. If you get to the point where you notice that you're sitting in a chair more during the day than not, then that's when some of this next equipment is going to certainly come into play. The first one is a manual wheelchair, and this one happens to be an ultra lightweight wheelchair. So it's made with extremely lightweight material, and you can have push handles on the back so that somebody, a caregiver, can push you if need be. One of the common things that people don't realize is that manual wheelchairs tend to be really wide. So if doorway widths within your house are an issue, a manual wheelchair will certainly be an issue, because ultimately the width of the actual seat cushion is, you then add 8 inches for the wheels to be on each side because you sit within the wheels. Most people don't realize that that is a tremendous amount. You go from an 18-inch wide wheelchair to ultimately, 26 inches overall width. And if you have a bathroom door that's 24 inches wide, you are not going to be able to get in using this type of wheelchair. The other con is, whether you have limitations in your upper extremity range of motion, pushing a chair is really difficult. So this is not my first recommendation for anybody, but it's definitely a viable option. Sometimes what we put on manual wheelchairs are good in the sense that you can put it into a car, it can fold up to some degree, but again, the pushing becomes an issue. So there's power assist wheels where there is in the center of the wheel, there is a motor that allows you to push and it continues the push. So it gives you a little bit of a break from pushing, which is a nicer feature. The problem with anything that becomes motorized is the weight of it. So getting this in and out of a trunk, while doable, is certainly more difficult than, for instance, the transport chair or just a basic manual chair, because those wheels are 35 pounds each. And that becomes a little bit of a burden when you're going, in and out of the car to get to a doctor's appointment multiple times. There is another option. It's called the Smart Drive. The reason why sometimes people prefer this is because, again, transportation. So power wheelchairs, when we get into those, they do not go in a standard car. So this gives you the benefit of being able to transfer a manual wheelchair in the car, but allows you to add power to the back of it. It doesn't make the overall width of the chair much wider than the current manual chair, but it does allow you to extend your pushes so that you're not doing a lot of vigorous pushing for when you're in home. Some people really prefer the look of a manual chair. Again, this is not my primary means, because what happens when you're sitting in a manual chair is that you're unable to change the position of your legs or your back as to make you more comfortable. So this is certainly an option, but maybe not an option number one. Oh, okay. Okay, I don't know what that was. We're losing it again. Sorry, guys. Okay. Can you guys still see it? Okay. There is another feature of a manual chair that is a power add-on where it includes a joystick that you can place at the armrest, and a little motor built into the wheel. And this again is a very transportable chair. It has a few extra parts to take apart before getting it into the trunk of a car, but it certainly can go into the trunk of a car. The con part of it is, again, you're in a fixed position. There's no change in your back angle or your feet for comfort. So when you're sitting there in it for most of the day, it does become uncomfortable and you're unable to relieve your pressure without getting out of the chair. A manual tilt and space allows you to change your position while somebody else is pushing you. So it has this tilt feature where the back angle has the potential to adjust if need be, and you can get your feet over your heart so that it helps with edema or that swelling in your legs, and just overall changing the position so you're not staying at a fixed position at all times. The cons to this is that while, again, they could potentially be placed into a car, they tend to be very bulky and they're a lot heavier because the actual tilt mechanism has to encompass the seat pan of the chair. And then power chairs. I think, just in general for disease progression, power chairs tend to be the most beneficial because there's so many things that can be done to a power chair. I have been told so many times that I can't move my arms, so I can't drive a power chair. There are so many unique ways to drive a power chair. There are eye gaze interfaces, which we can now, I'll show you in the next few slides, that allow you to control not just driving the chair, but changing your position in the chair, which for every single person that I've ever met in clinic, this is probably the most important thing. Giving the ability to perform not just a tilt position, but a recline position where it opens up your back angle. This is wonderful for people who have, incontinence and are out in public and they need to change their diaper, or they need to just overall change their position because their hips are hurting or their tush is hurting, and then you combine these features and the pressure relief is immense. This is essentially what a power chair can do for you. You can lift your feet up. You can even bring them higher than what they're currently showing here so that your feet end up going over your head, and you can end up in what's called a Trendelenburg position, which is sometimes really, really nice for people with severe swelling. If there's respiratory concerns, they can certainly adjust their posture so that they can function. You can, untilt the chair so you can fit underneath a table, and then recline or unrecline so that you're able to function and not feel like, gravity is pushing you all the way down, and being able to move, which is so important. And again, if we can get you to drive, we can get you to change your position. And that is so imperative for comfort, especially for somebody who just wants to sit there and be engaged with their family, participate in whatever activities, watching TV, getting onto a computer, communication. Positioning is probably the most important thing that I'm always informed about. So as I mentioned, you do not need to move your hand in order to drive. There are so many unique ways that we can get you to drive, whether we can place your hand in a gravity assisted movement to move a joystick, or we can use alternative drive controls, such as the one here. So actually these pads that are on the sides and on the back have sensors in them, and it tells the power chair which way to drive, or which motion to go into. And then we can engage, anywhere that you have movement being able to toggle back and forth between power driving and powered seating so that you can independently perform this for as long as needed, to make you just comfortable and not to constantly be, asking somebody to help you, to move their leg or to make you comfortable. This is a difficult picture to see, but this is actually an eye gaze system that Jesse will talk more about. But the reason I'm showing this is because there is an app that allows you to get in contact with the power wheelchair, and you can drive this basically using your eyes. So you you toggle over where you want to go on the screen. There is an arrow pointing forward, an arrow pointing in reverse, and your left and right. And just as long as you're using the eye gaze for communication, you can use it to not only drive the chair, but get into your seating system to, again, lift your legs, tilt out of that position, untilt, just make yourself completely comfortable without having to ask somebody to do so. Another thing that comes up a lot is transfers. There are so many techniques that are out there that I truly encourage you to be seen by a therapist who understands what ALS is and help you get through the best transfer based on your body and what's best for your caregiver as well. There are pivot discs, such as the one up here, where if you plant your feet on it, the person can be transferred from one surface to the other. And it's a very simple swivel. It's two discs that go one on top of the other, and they go in opposite directions so that it allows you to easily transfer without breaking an ankle, or getting your foot caught somewhere, or hurting your caregiver or yourself. So that's a great option. Another piece that is beneficial is a gait belt, and this can be placed around your waist to help lift, so people aren't giving you a wedgie type sensation by lifting at your pants. So now there are definite pros and cons with a gait belt. The first one being that if your hips are wider than your trunk, the gait belt will come up and kind of, give you a corset feeling. That is a huge problem for somebody who has a peg tube. So if you have a peg feed in place, you do not want to use a gait belt. There are other techniques that you can use to help you get from one surface to the other. Like if you're trying to, find the best way to get in and out of from wheelchair to bed or bed to wheelchair, there are definitely techniques that you can discuss with your therapist that would be the safest option, and it does not include a gait belt. There are sliding boards that you can use, which is basically a wooden board that bridges the gap between one surface to the other. For instance, this picture is showing the wheelchair to the bed, and vice versa. You can use it is like a very slippery surface that you're sliding across. And again, transfer training so that the correct body mechanics of your caregiver is very essential so that nobody is getting hurt during the transfer. On the bottom here, this is called a BZ board. There is a disc that slides right to left, and it works the same way as a transfer board would. The BZ boards are fantastic in assisting with that transfer because it makes it a very slippery kind of transition from one surface to the other. But again, the con would be that it makes it very slippery from one surface to the other. So definitely, finding a therapist who can help you for the transfer training is imperative in my belief. There are Hoyer lifts that you can also get. These are covered by insurance. This one in particular on the center here is a manual hydraulic lift. So that means that you are pumping, your caregiver is pumping this lever back and forth to slowly raise you and the harness up. The loan closet they're such a wonderful resource. They have quite a few power Hoyer lifts available, so that your caregiver does not have to do a pumping mechanism, and they can easily press a button on a remote and raise you up. Sometimes when people are kind of suspended in a manual hydraulic lift, they feel the every kind of jerking movement of the hydraulic pump. So definitely using the loan closet to be provided with a power lift is by far probably your best option. There's different slings that are available. I prefer the U sling because there is so many reasons why, but ultimately it's a removable sling. It can completely come off of you so that you're not sitting on a sling all day long. Whenever you're sitting on a sling, it takes away from the properties of the pressure relieving cushion that you're on, and therefore you're not as comfortable as you potentially could be. There are ceiling track lifts, which are wonderful. They're out of the way. You don't have this big bulky piece of equipment in your home that you need to store when not in use. There's big cons to this, and the first and foremost being that it is not covered by insurance, and it is a very costly price. There are some options out there for what type of track system you can use. But again, they are not covered by insurance, and we do not have them in the loan closet, unfortunately. But again, this provides you just a single harness, and this sling is the only thing that you're actually storing, which is a really nice feature for when you're talking about having a power chair and a multitude of other equipment. This is really nice to not have to store a Hoyer lift. Some other transfers, it's sometimes just kind of thinking outside the box. I've been told many times by some of my patients that, I can't use my Hoyer lift in the bathroom to go from my toilet to my chair to my toilet. And, sometimes it's that thinking outside the box that there's rolling shower commode chairs that these can come out of the bathroom. You can easily transfer in your bedroom or wherever your biggest open space is from your wheelchair to the rolling shower chairs. And then this can fit over the toilet so that you can have a bowel movement or, urinate as needed. And then you can also then go into a roll-in shower if you have a roll-in shower. But otherwise, just the ability to get on and off of the toilet without having to, worry about slipping on tile, etc., is a very impactful piece of equipment. There are a multitude of hospital beds to also consider. The only one that's covered by the insurance company is semi-electric, which means that it allows you to push a button to control the head of the bed, the legs of the bed, but it does not control the height of the bed to go up and down. So there's like a crank mechanism underneath the bed that a caregiver would have to use. I believe that the loan closet has some pieces of some fully electric beds so that it's all touch of a button and you can make that height adjustment. So definitely get in contact with Kyle so that he can hook you up with that. There's also a multitude of mattresses that allow you to assist in, just positioning. It also helps with respiratory needs. There's one that actually turns you like in this picture, which for some people, this is all they need to actually be able to get their feet off the side of the bed to maintain that independence. They can kind of do like a log roll with the mattress. It depresses on one side and inflates on the other side. So it's almost, it's the closest thing to an injector kind of bed, and it allows you to kind of get up a little bit easier. But this is also fantastic for respiratory concerns. And we're almost there. Neck support. So positioning in general is just something that is constantly brought up to my attention, and I'm sure every therapist at every single clinic. There are so many different neck collars out there to support neck function, or this kyphotic forward gravity dependent kind of posture that starts to come as neck weakness comes in. So this tends to be the one that is preferred the most. It's by Headmaster. It has basically all of the accessory muscles in the middle of the neck wide open without having anything touching that area, which people find easier for controlling, for swallowing and being able to speak. Which I think is obviously probably top priority. There are full neck collars, but again, there's a lot of pressure that's being placed on the accessory muscles and in terms of the, for respiratory as well. The other thing that you can include is on a power chair, we have the ability to include certain types of neck supports. This is called the Savant. Of course, this is the one that is not covered by insurance, but it almost has like these finger-like protrusions that kind of come in and cup the base of your neck, and then they have a forward strap to prevent a head drop sensation. This is certainly something that it needs so much more work on. Ben and I have been in multitudes of discussions for this, how to provide comfort in a neck support without taking away from the function of being able to breathe, being able to swallow, being able to communicate is certainly something that is on our radar for everybody on this call. And hopefully in the next few months, year, we can develop something that, with everyone's input can kind of lead into a more supportive neck support for comfort. A lot of times just a toddler pillow ends up being some of my patients' best friends. It provides the ability to be soft enough and squishy enough that they place it right in front of their headrest, and they just use this, it's a much smaller pillow than a normal pillow, and it provides as much support as it possibly can without breaking the bank. Okay, and so now that kind of leads into Jessie, who is our speech therapist. She is going to be able to provide us with a lot more information on, well, a lot of stuff we just touched on. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Okay, great. I'm just going to jump in briefly before Jess, you start. Sorry to interrupt. We ran a little bit long on that first segment, but we know all the information is so important to everyone that's viewing this segment. So thank you, Lauren. We really appreciate it. Jess, I'm going to turn the mic over to you, but I just wanted to let everyone know we're running a little bit long. It'll be Jess and then Ben next. And we hope to get to all of your questions. I want to assure everyone, if you put questions in the chat and we're unable to get to every question, we do have a session on Friday where we will follow up and get your questions answered, but we're going to make every attempt to answer any questions you have in this segment. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, Tracy, and thank you, Lauren. As you know, I was introduced before. I'm Jessie. I'm the speech therapist. And what we were going to talk about today, if I can get my slides up here, was assistive communication tools, how they can help you, and maybe some of these things that you see today. We'll kind of link it into what Lauren was talking about, and what Ben is going to be talking about afterwards. But I don't even know why I made an agenda, but I figured we'd start with just some basics on communication, swallowing. Lauren, you kind of touched on those things, and a lot of that has to do with positioning. We'll speak a little of voice and message banking, as well as some compensatory strategies, and then kind of the alternative or assistive options and tools that we can use. So just real brief, communication can impact like 80 to 95% of PALs. And, when I say communication, I mean verbal communication. Sometimes our abilities can fluctuate day to day, but can generally progress over time. So we want to make sure that you might have some tools that can kind of help you along the way. Dysarthria and hypophonia are two terms that you might hear. Dysarthria is just the general blanket term for motor speech disorder. Hypophonia is a real loose term for just kind of a weakness in the voice. And a lot of that has to do with respiratory drive for speech. So the speech pathologist in your clinic or on your team, or, maybe in your community can kind of help, work with you to kind of maximize your abilities to communicate effectively. Some of the things that we like to talk about are voice preservation, compensatory strategies, and kind of low to high tech assistive tools or devices. And we'll go into that a little bit later. So just real quick, because this is not about swallowing, but I just wanted to kind of touch on how sometimes when we do have some swallowing difficulties, this can impact our ability to communicate. And that's because dysphagia or swallowing impairment can lead to increase in saliva, might have some pooling or some drooling even. We can have an increase in phlegm and mucus in the throat, which can make our voice sound wet and gurgly, and it can be a little bit harder to communicate verbally because of that. So I just wanted to kind of quickly link that. We don't have to go through these, but just kind of outline some strategies for swallowing, just very simple, just to ensure we're swallowing safely, being a little extra careful, help preventing anything, going towards our airway instead of our stomach, and just making sure we're minimizing, the mucus in the back of the throat as much as possible, and making sure, we're doing it in a way that's safe. So what I did want to touch on, this is a little kind of tool that we can use. It's called the Expiratory Muscle Strength Trainer, EMST 150. That's the blue one you see there. And then the EMS ST75 Lite. This is basically half of the power of the blue one over here. But what this does, you're basically, you could see at the bottom here is the mouthpiece. You can attach other mouthpieces to this. But what this does, this has you kind of blowing against resistance. And what that does, that kind of helps to strengthen the muscles that we use for coughing, the muscles that we use for swallowing, and overall, it helps us with the muscles we use for respiration, which is a huge piece of verbal communication and speech production, right? So if you're not generating good airflow from the lungs, your voice is going to sound quiet, your speech will sound quiet, and it can be more difficult to understand. So this is a really great tool that I would recommend speaking to your team about, the respiratory therapist, the speech therapist, as well as your physician. And this can really be helpful, again, to help with breathing, swallowing, and cough, right? So moving on from that, I want to switch gears a little and kind of talk to you about voice and message banking, okay? So voice banking is a way to kind of create like a synthesized or digitalized version of your voice that can be used on a communication device, right? And this is a way to make it more personalized, so it sounds like you and not like the, I like to say, robotic or generic voice that lives in the software program. I think we all know what Siri and Alexa, sound like. So this is basically a way for you to kind of create this kind of digitalized version of your voice. Is it perfect 100%? No, I'd say most things are not 100%, but this is a really good way to kind of give you that little, piece of your voice, right? And that piece of yourself that you can carry on to an alternative form of communication if it's needed.
Hey, Jess, I'm so sorry to jump in.
Yeah.
Your screen share is not visible to us.
Oh, okay. Let's see. I am so sorry about that. How do I? Don't think I clicked it. Can you see it now?
I think it's coming up now.
Okay.
There we go. Yeah, thank you so much.
I am so sorry about that. So let me just backtrack to the last slide, which was the EMST 150. This is what it looks like. I was saying the blue and the green. The green is basically half the strength of the blue one here. But just so you guys, when you're looking, if you're looking to do it, this is what it is. Okay. There's lots of other tools on the market. The research doesn't really back those tools up as much as this being something that can help our pals. Okay. So sorry. So we're going to go back to the voice and the message banking. So the voice banking we just described, the message banking is a way for you to kind of create these like personalized messages, right? Or your isms, right? So things that you would say on a regular basis, like, hi, I'm Jessie, nice to meet you. Stop hitting your brother. I love you. Go away. Any kind of messages. I've had lots of patients that record things that they say to their dogs or their grandchildren, their children. It could be very colorful things that I'm not allowed to maybe say over this call here, or it can be as much or as little as you'd like. And those messages can also be placed on a communication device if one was needed. All right, so how do you do the voice banking, the message banking? It is easy. It is something you could do at home on your own. Obviously, if we needed some extra support, you could work with your local speech therapist, your assistive tech center, a liaison, maybe through ALSA, who could maybe help kind of guide you in the right direction to help with that. But if you go to teamgleason.org, you can click some links there to kind of sign up to do the voice and message banking, and they will actually help to cover the cost. They have some grant money there and they can help you out with that. I will stress that the voice and the message banking is something that should be done early as possible because the nature of ALS is very unpredictable, and I don't think anyone can guarantee if your voice or your speech will stay exactly the same, if it's going to change, or when that might happen. Earlier the better here for this. All right, so what do we do now, right? What do we do if our speech is changing and our voice is changing? And again, I just want to touch back on what Lauren was saying before. Ideally, to produce clear speech and have a strong voice, you want to be positioned correctly, right? So ideally, your chest is open, your shoulders are down and back. We have this nice kind of open kind of pathway, right, that the air can travel out through our lungs, out through our voice box. Once it gets to the voice box, we are then moving our mouth and our lips and our soft palate to kind of produce all of these different sounds that we make. So I think, to go back to the positioning piece, the chair, whatever type of chair you may or may not be using, if you're sitting on the couch, if you're kind of slouched over, if our head support or neck support isn't great, all of those things can kind of impact how our speech sounds. So let's kind of, go through a little bit the compensatory strategies, the assistive tools, and then if, some of these kind of easier types of tools or assistive tools aren't working for you, then, we might want to do a more comprehensive evaluation, right? So it's what we call augmentative alternative communication. That is usually a team of a speech therapist, an occupational therapist, and possibly a technology specialist as well, who can kind of help to kind of work together and get some of these more high-tech and very costly communication devices. So I just laid out a few of the places that we typically refer to in the tri-state area. Helen Hayes Hospital up in Rockland County. We have NYU Rusk in Manhattan. There's a few different Kesslers, and I know Robert Wood Johnson in New Jersey that can be helpful. Westchester Institute of Human Development near White Plains, and the Bridging Voice Foundation, which can, they can kind of do some remote, assistance and serve as like a long-term support, right? As well as, Ben, who you're going to meet later from ALSA, and your ALSA representative or liaison, who can be really helpful as well with a lot of these tools. So compensatory speech strategies, right? They're simple, they're effective, right? You're going to speak slowly. We're going to over exaggerate, like really move your mouth big. We're going to maybe try to speak in shorter phrases so our communication partner has the time to understand, right? Because it can be frustrating if we're constantly repeating ourselves. So, speaking in shorter phrases can help. Facing your partner, taking voice breaks if we're feeling fatigued or tired, and breathing, right? We want to make sure you're always replenishing your lungs to kind of keep that power source going. The power in our voice is coming from below. It's coming from the lungs, right? So really important to stop, breathe in, and keep that power source replenished. As far as some assistive tools that we can use when our voice is strong and our speech is intelligible, and I think Ben's going to go more into this, but there are some voice activated tools like, Google Home or, Siri. I know Ben's going to go into that later, but, this can be used if speech is functional and intelligible, right? Something that, we recommend quite often for someone who has a quiet sounding voice, who maybe isn't able to be understood because the voice is quiet, we'll recommend a voice amplifier. And, Ben can tell you how many times a week I request one from the ALSA loaner closet. Kyle can as well. But this is a really kind of low tech tool that can just make the voice a little louder, right? It's not going to change the quality of the speech. And I just want to clarify that, because I think, sometimes our patients think, oh, if I get this voice amplifier, it's going to really help everybody understand me, right? So it doesn't improve or help with clarity of the speech. What this is going to do is going to help make everything louder. So speech will sound exactly as it sounds. It's just going to be a little bit amplified. So we're not doing as much or exerting as much energy. And again, we want to make sure our communication partners aren't expecting, a miracle with this. There are little things that can, go wrong. It could give you some feedback, right? It can, if you're in one room and the communication partner is in the other, they still might not hear you, right? So keep that in mind. A lot of these things that we discuss, they can, kind of help and assist with certain things, but it's not going to be 100% maybe the way that you want it to be. So that's voice amplifiers. This is a very simple form of written communication. So, and I will say that a lot of our pals prefer to use this as an option if our hand strength is good, right? So if you're able to write, and again, you want to be positioned, right, in a good way so that the boogie board or the whiteboard might be supported and your arm is feeling supported and you can write, right? So this you could see on the screen here is just a little, it's like a magic slate or an Etch-a-Sketch. You can write on it, and this little button up top here clears the screen, right? So I always like to say this is the environmentally friendly communication option, because otherwise, we have some patients that use lots of paper and notebooks and pens, and obviously that's not as environmentally friendly, but this is a really great option, and I think this is really helpful when speech isn't as intelligible and you might want to just clarify a word or two that was maybe misunderstood or not understood. You could write it down and you have to show your communication partner, right? So this little guy here, he doesn't make any noise. It's all visual. So if your partner, like your husband, wife, mother, father, child, can't read or can't see well, this isn't going to be very functional, right? Because you have to show your communication partner what you've written down. And I just showed you a smaller kind of example here. You have to have very good dexterity for this, and you have to be able to write in very small letters. Otherwise, the bigger one can be an option. And the whiteboards as well, right? Just a classic whiteboard with some markers. Some people prefer that over the boogie board, but it's the same type of communication. Here, I just showed some examples of communication boards. Again, this requires a communication partner who can see, right, what you're showing them. What I did show you here is just kind of an example of, using the finger to kind of point to the different options, right? So, this is something that can be helpful if we're having a really hard time communicating. Maybe written communication isn't working because our dexterity isn't great, and maybe some of the other options are just not really working out for us. This is always a good kind of fallback. And even if you do use like a fancy eye gaze device to communicate, you're not always going to have that, glued to your side. You might not always have great access to it. So, these options are so important. They're so simple, but so important. And you can actually just kind of show your communication partner what you might be needing, right? Is that a change in position? Is that the bathroom? Is that some oral care? Is that, call my, whoever it is, family member, turn the lights off. All of those kind of basic needs can be on there. The other side of the screen had a letter board, right? Again, same thing. If you have the dexterity, you can kind of point to those letters and spell something out, right? Can be nice, it can be not nice, it can be, whatever it is. But this, the letter boards kind of require your communication partner to be really in tune, right? Because they're going to potentially have to sit there with a pen and paper and write down what you're spelling out, right? So that could take a little bit of time. And it certainly requires some patience, right, from our pals and from their communication partners as well. So, I would definitely recommend, getting some basic letter boards, communication boards, just to have as backup, right? You never know when you might need it. Can be really helpful and avoid some pretty frustrating situations. There are some alternative pointers. Again, I think Ben's going to go into this a little bit, but if you're not able to kind of pick your finger up and point or have the board in front of you and kind of maneuver around it, you could use, something like this little stylus here that might be a little easier to grasp. You could use this laser pointer here and have the communication board in front of you. So if you have some head movement, you can kind of, use that laser pointer to spell things out or select things from a communication board. This is a Lite Writer. I honestly, in many years of working in the clinic and with PALS, I've had very few patients that use this, but it is an option. And again, we have to be able to use our hands with this to type. Right. Once you type something, you can see on the screen down there, it kind of shows up. And then there is sound that can come from this. Okay. I find, most people don't prefer this option because it does sound very robotic and people don't tend to like that as much. Here's an example of a text-to-speech app. Again, if you have some hand dexterity, or maybe if you can hold a stylus, you can use this. This, again, this can go on a tablet. This could go on a smartphone. What you can kind of see here, you could kind of type in this box here. There's some buttons here that, there's a speak button on the side here. There's some preloaded phrases. There's some very basic text-to-speech apps like Talk for Me or Speech Assist, which this is a picture of. And then, the apps, they get kind of fancy, right? There's Proloquo to go, there's Predictable. They're way more comprehensive. They have a lot more word recognition kind of software embedded in the programs that kind of make this a little bit easier. What I will say about the text-to-speech apps, it's never as fast as anybody wants it to be, okay? So this can be a really great tool to use if our speech is impaired, but it takes time, right? So it's gonna take patience from our pals, from the family members. It's not always loud. Like if you're in one room and someone else is in a different room, it might not be loud enough. I like to recommend hooking it up to a Bluetooth speaker in the home, so it just kind of amplifies it a little bit more. But, again, this has to be, used if we have some hand movement or we can hold a stylus, and our communication partner has to be patient, right? Because it can take a little bit of time to type things out. I would recommend that you spend some time kind of customizing phrases or words that you kind of might use on a regular basis. So you could just select that phrase or word versus typing something out every single time. All right. Here is something that's called an iLink board. So you could see there's this clear letter board, right? We have our patient on one side and our communication partner on the other there. This can be a really great tool, or this can be a really frustrating tool. And I think this really depends on how much work and effort you're willing to kind of put in here. Basically, the way this works, this would be for someone who maybe doesn't have functional speech, but also doesn't have functional hand movement, right? Or arm movement, and they're not able to use any of the other options we were kind of looking at. Basically, the way it works, you have that board kind of held up. So the person who's using it to communicate is looking at the letters, and the communication partner is kind of maneuvering the board until your eyes are linking on the letter, right? So for example, if she's looking at the G here, we would have to kind of maneuver it around to get it to that point, right? It also, you want to establish some kind of yes/no system, whether it's 2 blinks when you look at the letter, or a little thumb movement, or whatever it might be, whatever is functional, because you want to make sure you're getting the letters correctly. This, I've seen a lot of really great success with this, and I'm just going to, we had a patient many
Yes,
years ago.
I'm sorry to interrupt you mid-sentence. It's I know that we're trying to pack in 3 days of work into an hour presentation, but I'm going to go back on mute and just ask you to wrap if you can, so we can get Ben in.
Got it.
All right, thank you so much. I apologize for interrupting.
No worries. So this is iLink. We could talk about that more. We could use some scanning with our letter boards and picture boards. And again, this is the onus is really on the communication partner, not the person who we're trying to communicate with. Okay, so I'm gonna stress that again. Lauren kind of showed us a little before. Here's a sample of an eye gaze device. You could see it mounted on the power chair there. These devices use eye tracking controls to select. We can make phone calls with this. We can email. We can do the text to speech options. Again, takes time, takes patience, takes practice. Okay. This is a high-tech kind of scanning device where you use a switch control that gets kind of activated with a muscle. Okay. So it can be any muscle in our body that we have some control over, that this switch can be kind of paired up with that muscle, and it scans through the device, and you kind of can do all of those things using that. Okay. Just kind of wrapping it up here now. I made this cheesy little acronym here, but when communication is challenging, you're going to work with your team and find a new way to speak, right? So we're gonna share the work. It's a team effort. We're going to have patience. We're going to try to intervene early, right? Early intervention. We're going to try alternative methods, and we're going to keep going, right? So some of these tools may work for you, some might not, some can be frustrating, but caregiver, family support is really key here to make communication functional. Okay, so thank you. I'll wrap it up there.
Thank you so much, Jess. I appreciate it. Thank you for all of your wonderful information. And we're going to go to Ben next, and then we'll do a Q&A at the end. Ben?
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm going to give a overview of our loan program and related services. And then I'm going to end on some of the key features that are available in everyone's computer, whether it's Mac or PC, or iPhone or Android. There are features there that might enable someone who's beginning to lose some function in their hands and fingers. These features might be able to enable that person to extend the use or their interaction with these devices. I'm going to start with the equipment loan program, and thank you, Lauren and Jessica, for your, I know it was very brief, and any one of us could have spoken for a couple of hours on our topics, but it just gives people an overview of the types of equipment that they may come in contact with. And many of the items that you spoke about were are part of our equipment loan program. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about our home accessibility assessment program, and then also our assistive technology and information program, as Jessica was referring to. what? Okay, sorry. So the two presenters, Lauren and Jessica, before me, pretty much identified the top items that we provide throughout the year from our equipment loan program: power wheelchairs that tilt and recline, manual and tilt standard wheelchairs, as well as the transport wheelchairs. The eye tracking devices, we do have many of those out there. As Kyle mentioned in an earlier session, we get more requests than we have devices. We try to get them to you as quickly as possible. I know later this week, I'm in the field picking two up. One is a return and one is a new donation. So we try to get them cleaned up and sent out as quickly as possible. We do try to stock the loan closet with power patient lifts. Lauren made reference to the one that you get through insurance is a manual one, but it's so much more versatile to have a power patient lift if available. So we try to keep several of those available. And then voice amplifiers. Yes, I get a number of requests from Jessica weekly on voice amplifiers. So that is another item that we provide a lot of. The goal of the equipment loan program is really to minimize the cost to someone if equipment is not covered by insurance, and to minimize the wait time that someone may have for equipment. For example, the power wheelchairs. We're told it can happen within 2 or 3 months, but there's often some glitch that delays it. So if we have it sitting in our loan closet and you've begun the process of ordering one yourself, we want you to have one while you're waiting. The other program that we provide is a home accessibility assessment, and I'm just going to really quickly touch upon the key features of this. But we want anyone who has the potential to need adaptations in their home to have a heads up as to what some of those adaptations may need to be. So I focus on 3 areas: 1, getting in and out of the house; 2, getting in and out of the bathroom or the bathtub or shower area; and 3, if there's a second floor, how are you going to manage dealing with that? These are large issues to deal with. So if I can walk through the house, and of late that has happened in a remote fashion, just giving you a heads up as to what type of impact some of these modifications might entail. These larger items, stair glides, porch lifts, ramps, are not included in our loan program, but we do have connections with vendors and contractors who have done this type of work before, and we can at least point you in the right direction. This is an example of a ramp that has 5 steps into the home. And a lot of times I met with a presumption on the part of the family that the ramp isn't going to be so long. But here's a really good example that this house is not set back from the sidewalk that far. And they had a choice of having the ramp wrap around the house and go towards the back of the house, or switch back like this. And it pretty much is taking up the whole lawn. So what we want to accomplish is giving people a heads up as to what they might be encountering. And then our assistive technology program, we have call bells, a way to just call for assistance. It's just a small button that rings a doorbell. Somebody may be able to speak, but their voice may be weak. And rather than spend the energy getting up and getting assistance for whatever it might be, just having a button nearby to press and have someone else in the house know that, oh, they've been requested to come out to assist can be helpful. Laser pointers, I think that was part of Jessica's presentation. Anything that will help use low or high tech for communication. And we do have a few smart home items available to share and certainly to speak to you about. And what I want to spend a little bit of time on now are some features within computers that enable continued use even though there may be limited hand function. So I named this "What's in Your Computer?" or phone. And I want to reinforce that the presumption is that you need a lot of dexterity to use a computer or phone, but that's not actually the case. So certainly it's hands all across the board for using the mouse, for clicking and having access to the keyboard and tapping on the phone. But I'm going to try to highlight some ways that you can interact with the computer that either removes complete use of the hands or minimizes the use of the hands. So there are three areas that I'm going to focus on. The two at the bottom I'm not going to get to today. Eye control, head movement are additional means of interacting with a phone or a computer, and that you can certainly reach out to us for more information about. I want to identify how one-touch typing, you can get away with just using the keyboard and not the mouse. 180 degrees opposite, you can also get away with using the mouse and not the keyboard. And then with voice control, with understandable speech, you can use phones and computers almost fully, again, if your voice is understandable. Where would you find the setup process for any of these features? It's pretty much in a setting for accessibility. In Windows, it's in a setting under ease of access. So if you can get through settings or system preferences or control panel, you can find these locations to make these adjustments. So first, with the keyboard, and again, this is going to be really quick, just to give you an idea of what you might be able to adjust on your computer if you have the capability to move your hand over the keys and then using a finger or a pointer to press one key at a time. So there are three functions that's going to entail. One is sticky keys, two is mouse keys, and then three are keyboard shortcuts, which many people already utilize a little bit. The more you know about keyboard shortcuts really can extend your use of the keyboard. So what sticky keys is basically changes the requirement when using any of the special keys like Command or Shift or Control. They're always associated with at least one or two other buttons. And that becomes part of the difficulty, is not having two fingers available at one time. With sticky keys, and then utilizing the command, the keyboard command of Control C, you can highlight a word, and with Control C, you've copied it, and then where you want it to go, you move the cursor, and then Control V pastes it. So that's an example of keyboard command. And here's what it would look like normally. You have two fingers pressing Control and C, but with sticky keys, all you need to do is press the Control key and then move your finger, the same finger, to the C, and the Control key is kept down and active. So you've reduced two fingers to one finger. This would work with any of the keyboard commands. So another example of a keyboard command is Alt-D, and that jumps your cursor into the address bar, and it can save the effort of moving your hands from the keyboard to the mouse if you have access to Alt and D, not at the same time, just one at a time. Then you can add to this a function called mouse keys. And what this does is it changes the numeric keypad on the right side of a large keyboard to mouse movements. So I'm going to zoom in here, and on the larger keyboard, it will show you the directional arrows that the mouse, that you would now be controlling the mouse to do. It's not indicated here, but the 7 would move the cursor on the screen diagonally up and to the left. The 3 would move the cursor diagonally and to the right. So you've changed the need for the mouse and reaching over for the mouse to maintaining that continuity on the keyboard. And these features are available on the smaller keyboards as well. Let me just go back here really quickly and show you 7, 8, and 9, with the 7 going diagonally up and the 8 going straight up. On a mini keyboard, those same numbers will do the same function and control the mouse, control the cursor, so long as you've activated mouse keys and the numlock feature on the small keyboards. So in Windows and Mac, sticky keys, keyboard shortcuts, and mouse keys are available. On phones, you're pretty much already doing one finger typing. On the iPhone and iPad, there is an additional option through Assistive Touch that would give you some other benefits as well. And again, any of these can be questions either later today, Friday afternoon as we close out the summit, and you can contact Kyle or I in any of the different ways that's been mentioned before. So I'm just going to shift now to operating the computer with your mouse. So this now is dependent on mouse movement, but you don't need the keyboard. So long as you can clasp lightly the mouse and move it around, these features will be available to you. And it's dependent on an on-screen keyboard. Now, typically, when people are using an on-screen keyboard, they're moving the mouse and clicking. What I want to highlight is that there's actually a feature for both Mac and PC.
Hi there. I think Ben is frozen. Are we? Okay. Well, Ben, I'm just going to jump in here. Actually, it may be it may be appropriate to jump in at this time because we have a hard stop at 4:45. Our cameras will shut off. This session will end. So in the last couple of minutes that we have, I do want to just say thank you. A huge thanks to the amazing professionals that we had present to us on this segment. Lauren from Northwell, thank you. Jess from Columbia, thank you. Ben, our very own Ben, who is frozen at the moment, but I just want to assure everyone, if you put a question into the chat, and it looks like we're not going to be able to get to it. So I apologize for that, but we will answer your questions. We do have a segment on Friday, and it begins at 3:45. At that time, we will answer your questions, and we may be able to email you the answers beforehand from our panelists. Again, my apologies. We ran a little bit long, but I think that just goes to show how important the speech language therapists, our occupational therapists, our physical therapists, and our very own loan equipment program is to our ALS community. So thank you all again for being with us for this segment. Again, on Friday, we have the last segment. It's entitled, if you look it up on the agenda, Following Up, What Comes Next. That is where you can get some of your questions answered, and that segment is at 3:45. So thanks again, and apologies for running long, but I really want to thank the professionals that have been on this panel for providing the information that you all have. Thank you so much.